Level 1. The Merchant's Apprentice. The telegram arrives at midnight. Your father drops it on the desk. No explanation. No preamble. 3 words from your grandfather in London. Send the boy. You are 17. You have never been to London. You have never been asked. You have watched your father work his entire career. Hartford, then London, absorbing finance the way other boys absorb baseball scores. You understand something most boys don't. Numbers aren't just numbers. They're arguments. Every figure is a claim about the future. But your father hasn't told you everything. You piece it together. Overheard conversations. Letters left half open. The business nearly collapsed. Twice. The second time, your grandfather covered the shortfall himself. Quietly. Without documentation. To prevent a scandal that would have ended everything. Never let them see the mechanism. Your grandfather tells you in London, they invest in certainty. Our job is to perform it convincingly enough that they stop asking questions. You notice something in his eyes. Not dishonesty. Something more precise. The calm of a man who has made peace with the gap between appearance and reality, and decided the gap is necessary. Not immoral. Structural. The way a bridge needs tension to hold weight. At 24, you make your first independent decision. A southern firm. Cotton middlemen. Post-war capital. Desperate for credit. The numbers are marginal. The collateral is thin. The men who run it are plausible but not quite convincing. Every senior partner would say no. You say yes. The loan repays in full. You learn the wrong lesson. You mistake luck for vision. It takes 15 more years to understand what actually happened. By then, the habit of overconfidence has already calcified into something indistinguishable from authority. The most dangerous education is the one that begins with an accidental success. Level 2. The Man Who Stopped a Panic. It's 1895. The United States Treasury has $62 million in gold reserve. The legal minimum is $100 million. You have known about the shortfall for 3 months. So has Cleveland's Treasury Secretary. So has a small circle of New York bankers. Nobody has said anything publicly. Because saying it publicly triggers the exact crisis you're trying to prevent. You take the overnight train to Washington. You sit in an anteroom for 3 hours. Administration officials pretend they aren't desperate enough to see you. Then the door opens. You offer to syndicate a $62 million gold bond directly. Bypass Congress. Bypass public bidding. Move fast enough to stabilize the reserve before rumors become bank runs. The terms: your syndicate buys at 104.5, resells at 112, a spread that generates roughly $7 million in profit. For men who were never exposed to the risk they claim to be absorbing, the administration's objection is political. It will look like a private banker rescuing a sovereign government, which is exactly what it is. You wait. You say nothing. Silence is its own form of pressure. It lets the other side fill the void with their own desperation. They sign. The crisis is averted. You make headlines as a financial statesman. What doesn't make headlines? The gold drawn from the Treasury with one hand cycles back to purchase bonds with the other. The reserve is refilled using the reserve itself. It works. It is also, structurally, a kind of theater. Confidence restored by the performance of confidence. You saved the country's credit. You also extracted maximum value from a government with no alternative. Both facts coexist. Neither cancels the other. You learn to live in the space between them. Level 3. The Consolidator. The steel mills are bleeding each other out. Carnegie cuts prices below cost to destroy competitors. Frick builds vertical integration structures that swallow entire supply chains. The industry is fragmenting into a war of attrition. One survivor. A landscape of financial ruins. You see a different architecture, not competition, consolidation. One entity. Enough market position to set prices, allocate capacity, end the war. 14 months of negotiation. Carnegie alone requires 3 separate meetings. A valuation methodology invented specifically for this transaction. A final number, $480 million. So large newspapers treat it as fiction. United States Steel Corporation. The first billion-dollar company in American history. A private entity with more economic weight than most sovereign nations. What the prospectus obscures across 40 pages, U.S. Steel is overcapitalized. Stock issued against inflated asset valuations. You know this. Your bankers know this. Carnegie suspects it and doesn't care. His cash is already secured. He'll be building libraries in Pittsburgh while retail investors absorb the gap. That is the elegance of the structure. The risk travels in one direction. The reward travels in the other. And the two flows are never printed on the same page. Watered stock. The polite term for selling the public equity in a company structurally worth less than its offering price. Not illegal. But in a precise sense, theft with documentation. A congressional investigation estimates public investors lost several $100 million. You testify before Congress. Composed, precise, slightly contemptuous. Not of the committee, of the implication that you owe them an explanation. You built something real. You also extracted from the public a subsidy for building it. The question of which mattered more will occupy historians for a century. You will never be certain of the answer yourself. Level 4. The invisible hand of every railroad. You don't own the railroads. You own their debt. You hold board seats at 17 companies simultaneously. Not for operational control. For the ability to prevent decisions that conflict with each other. Your network of cross-board positions creates a coordination layer the American economy has never had. No law prohibits it. Because no law anticipated it. The law follows damage. You are operating in the interval before the damage is legible. Railroads financed through Morgan syndicates don't compete where competition would destroy margins. They signal rate changes through mechanisms that aren't cartels in the legal sense, but produce cartel outcomes. You've engineered harmony where the market would have produced chaos, and extracted a continuous fee from the harmony you engineered. Every farmer paying inflated freight costs in the Midwest is indirectly paying for your network. They don't know this. You've ensured there's no clean line of causation they could follow to your door. The 1902 Northern Securities case. The federal government calls it a monopoly. Your legal team calls it stability. Teddy Roosevelt doesn't care about the distinction. You call on the president personally. Have your man talk to my man. We'll fix it up. You mean this sincerely. This is how things have always been resolved between men of standing. Disputes between principals. Handled quietly, without escalation. The method has always worked. It will work now. Roosevelt stares at you for a long moment. He treats you as a problem, not a peer. The Supreme Court dissolves Northern Securities. You lose the case. You experience something rare. Genuine surprise at being refused. You built a world where rules bent toward the people who financed them. For the first time, you encounter a man who finds that world offensive and has enough popular mandate to say so. Power is the assumption that exceptions will always be made for you. The moment someone declines to make the exception, you discover whether you're powerful or just expensive. Level 5. The room where everything was decided. October 1907. The Knickerbocker Trust is failing. If it falls, 18 other institutions fall with it. You've run the numbers. By Friday morning, the panic will be systemic. A cascade failure. Credit contracts. Depression lasting years. There is no central bank. There is no government mechanism. There is only you. You summon the presidents of New York's major banks to your library at 219 Madison Avenue. It's midnight. They come because they have no choice. You lock the door, not metaphorically. You put the key in your pocket. 6 hours. You work through the architecture of the crisis. Which institutions are solvent but illiquid, which are genuinely insolvent? Which collapses can be sequenced to minimize cascading damage? You are not doing this for the public. You are doing it because the alternative is a world in which you are also ruined. Self-interest and public benefit, for once, pointing in the same direction. You commit $25 million from your syndicate. You compel each bank president to commit proportional shares before the key returns to the lock. One man refuses. You sit across from him. You don't raise your voice. You explain, in precise terms, what his institution's position will look like on Monday without coordinated support. He signs. The panic stops. Not because confidence returned organically. Because you replaced confidence with coercion and called the result stability. Samuel Untermeyer asks you, under oath, whether money is the primary basis for commercial credit. No, sir, you say. The first thing is character. The room goes silent. Then it erupts. The statement is received as either the deepest truth about finance or its most elegant lie. You sit there knowing it is both simultaneously, and that the ability to say it with complete conviction is itself a demonstration of the character you're describing. You saved the American financial system from a crisis that American finance created. The bill for this service was the creation of the Federal Reserve, an institution that would permanently end the era of the private banker as sovereign. You don't fully understand that yet. You will. Level 6. The machine outlives the man. J.P. Morgan dies in 1913, Rome, 75 years old. His estate is valued at $80 million. John D. Rockefeller, hearing the number, says, "And to think, he wasn't even a rich man." Rockefeller is right, in the narrow sense. Morgan's personal wealth was small compared to what passed through his hands. The real inheritance isn't in the estate documents. It's in the architecture, the board positions, the credit relationships, the institutional habits. All of it continues operating after the man who designed it is gone. You are Morgan's son now. Jack, you inherit the firm, the name, and an impossible standard. Your father was the last of a type, the private banker as sovereign actor, operating in the space before regulatory infrastructure existed to constrain him. That space is already closing. 1914. The war. The Allied governments need American credit desperately. Britain and France together will borrow over $2 billion through Morgan. You are the exclusive agent for both. You coordinate purchases of American war material, artillery, uniforms, food, chemicals, on a scale that will industrialize American manufacturing permanently and make certain families very wealthy in ways that war contracts obscure. Your personal commission, roughly $30 million. You also become the target of a bomb. 1920. Wall Street. An anarchist detonates a horse-drawn cart of iron weights outside 23 Wall Street at noon. 40 people die. Clerks, messengers, a young woman waiting to deposit a check. You are not in the building. You refuse to repair the pockmarks in the stone facade. Let them be seen, you say. We are not changed by this. Whether this is courage or performance, you've been in this role long enough that you've stopped being able to locate the difference. Level 7. The Glass-Steagall Reckoning. 1933, the Senate Banking Committee has your internal correspondence, all of it. Decades of private memos, internal valuations, syndicate agreements. Everything your grandfather believed would never leave the room. Ferdinand Pecora, a Sicilian-born prosecutor with no patience for institutional deference, reads your letters aloud to a packed gallery. Flashbulbs fire from every angle. The gallery is full of people who lost their savings. They have come to see the face of the system. You give them a face that gives nothing away. The letters reveal what critics suspected and defenders denied. Morgan Partners paid no personal income tax in 1931 and 1932. Preferred stock lists Securities sold below market price before public offerings included sitting judges, senators, and former Treasury officials. Favors structured as investment opportunities. Access priced in equity. None of it is criminal. That's almost the worst part. It's a social architecture so thoroughly normalized that the participants don't experience it as corruption. They call it stewardship. Responsible men keeping the machinery stable by ensuring the people with authority over it have a financial stake in its continued operation. You knew this. You participated in it. You believed, and somewhere still believe, that this is how the republic gets governed in practice, beneath the ceremonial layer of democratic process. A parallel system. But a functional one. Elections happen. Legislation passes. Speeches are delivered. And underneath all of it, in rooms without transcripts, the actual decisions get made by men who will still be there after the politicians rotate out. Pecora doesn't see stewardship. He sees a private club that priced membership in favors and called it finance. The public agrees with Pecora. Glass-Steagall passes. Commercial banking and investment banking separated by law. The integrated Morgan model, deposits, securities underwriting, industrial policy, all under one roof, is prohibited. The family splits the firm in two. Morgan Stanley, J.P. Morgan and Company. Both survive. Both will eventually become something your great-grandfather would not recognize as a bank. Vast, algorithmic, global, owning nothing and controlling everything through the same mechanism he invented, being the indispensable intermediary between capital and the people who need it. The mechanism persists. The man who built it is 2 generations in the ground. Nobody is steering it. That is not a problem. That is the design. Level 8. The architecture of deniability. You are not a banker. Your business card says Managing Director, Structured Finance. What this means in practice: you design financial products whose risk profile is invisible at the point of sale. Collateralized debt obligations. Synthetic derivatives referencing mortgage portfolios. Instruments so layered that the distance between the original asset and the final investor spans 6 legal entities, 4 jurisdictions, and 3 different regulatory frameworks that don't communicate with each other. The complexity isn't incidental. It is engineered. Complexity is the moat. This is not an accident. The layering is the product. You work in a building that bears your great-great-grandfather's name. You have read the Peugeot Committee transcripts, the preferred stock lists, the Waterloo bond operation, the locked library door. You find these stories interesting the way origin myths are interesting. Instructive about character. Not directly applicable to the present. The present is more sophisticated. The present has lawyers. In 2005, a junior analyst on your team sends you a memo. She's been running default correlation models on the underlying mortgage pools in your CDO pipeline. Her models show that default rates will exceed structural assumptions by a factor of 3 if housing prices fall more than 15% nationally. She asks, has this scenario been stress tested in the offering documents? You sit with the memo for 2 days. You forward it to legal. Legal responds that the disclosure language is consistent with industry standard. You file the memo. The product goes to market. You tell yourself this is the correct process. You ran it up the chain. The chain decided. Individual analysts are not supposed to halt billion-dollar pipelines based on unvalidated internal memos. This is what institutional process exists to prevent. The rating agencies rate the senior tranches AAA. The rating agencies are also being paid by the firms whose products they're rating. You know this. Everyone in the room knows this. It is not a secret. It is a structure, a mutually beneficial arrangement so thoroughly embedded in the market's operating logic that pointing it out feels like pointing out the sky is blue. Technically accurate. Practically irrelevant. 2008 comes. The housing market falls 17%. The junior analyst who wrote the memo in 2005 has left the firm. You don't know where she is. Once,
Late at night in an empty office, you find yourself wondering what she's thinking. Then the thought closes. The quarterly reports are on your desk. The numbers are bad, but survivable. The firm will require a government backstop. Not technically a bailout, structured specifically to avoid the word bailout. But it will survive. When journalists ask whether the firm bears responsibility for the crisis, your communications team provides a statement. The firm operated within all applicable regulatory frameworks and in accordance with industry standards. This is true. It is also a complete description of the problem. The Morgan dynasty didn't survive for a century because its members were uniquely cruel or uniquely corrupt. It survived because each generation learned, with increasing sophistication, how to be the indispensable person in the room, and how to ensure that being indispensable meant never being accountable. Terminal condition. You are the compliance officer. 5th generation. Wharton MBA. Your grandfather's grandfather shook hands with presidents. Your grandfather testified before Senate subcommittees. Your father negotiated the terms of deregulation. You manage a team of 47 analysts, ensuring the firm's structured products don't violate the Basel III capital requirements they helped design. The boundary between regulator and regulated at this altitude has always been a revolving door. Everyone knows it. Nobody says it at the table. The financial instrument you're reviewing today is technically compliant with every regulation on record. You know this because your team spent 3 months ensuring it before issuance. You also know, because you've read the underlying loan files, that a significant percentage of the reference mortgages were issued to borrowers who could not plausibly service them. You know it. And you continue. You have a performance review in 2 weeks. Your children are in private school. Your mortgage is structured against a bonus you haven't received yet, but will. These facts arrange themselves, quietly, into reasons. Because the alternative, refusing, escalating, walking out, requires a clarity about what you're participating in. A clarity that the institution has spent a century and a half teaching you not to have. The mechanism persists. You are the mechanism. You always were.